have seen the end of the world. Not in a dream. Not in a vision brought on by smoke or hunger, or the particular madness that the Christians like to attribute to women who speak of things that women are not supposed to speak of. I have seen the end of the world because I was there, standing at the edge of the burning plain, with the ash falling like black snow, watching the gods die one by one in the mud and the fire, watching the wolf swallow the father of everything, watching the thunder god take 9 steps and fall. 9 steps. I counted them. I count everything. That is what a vulva does. A vulva sees, and a vulva counts, and a vulva remembers, and the remembering is the telling, and the telling is the duty, and the duty does not end when the world ends, because the world, as I am about to tell you, does not stay ended. But I am getting ahead of myself. The end comes last. The beginning comes first. And the beginning was not light. The beginning was not a word. The beginning was a gap. Ginnungagap, imagine nothing. Not darkness, darkness is something. Not silence, silence is something. Not cold, not hot, not wet, not dry. Nothing. The absence so complete that the absence itself has no name, because naming requires a mouth and a language and a mind, and none of these things exist yet. That was the gap. There was no direction there until the worlds began to form around it. No above. No below. No distance that could be measured, because there was nothing to measure against. The gap was not a room waiting to be filled. It was the possibility of a room, the possibility of walls, the possibility of a roof, the possibility of a person standing inside and saying, "This is where I am." That matters, because the first act of creation was not making something. It was making difference. Ice was different from fire. Fire was different from emptiness. Later, earth would be different from sea, sky from ground, life from death. The Norse world begins with divisions, and every division contains a border, and every border eventually produces someone who wants to cross it. That was the gap. To the north of it, Niflheim formed, a place of ice. 11 rivers called the Eilífðr poured out of a spring and froze as they flowed, building layers of rime, the frost thickening the way a callus thickens on a working hand, layer upon layer, until the northern edge of the gap was a wall of ancient, patient cold. To the south, Muspelheim, fire, not the tame fire of a hearth, the original fire. The fire that existed before there was anything to burn, which means the fire was burning itself, feeding on its own heat, and at the edge of this realm stood a figure. Surtur, tall, black, patient, holding a sword that dripped flame. Waiting. Surtur has been waiting since before time began. He is still waiting. Remember him. He comes back at the end. The ice crept south. The fire breathed north. They did not move like armies. They moved like inevitabilities. There was no general commanding the frost, and no king ordering the flames. Cold simply spread because cold spreads. Heat simply traveled because heat travels. The worlds had not learned intention yet. They had only learned consequence. And when the two finally met, something happened that would repeat for the rest of existence. What looks like destruction from one side becomes creation from another. The frost did not merely die. It melted. The fire did not merely consume. It gave warmth to the melting. And the drops became the first evidence that the empty place could produce something new. Where ice met fire, the first life appeared. But life appeared already carrying the memory of the conditions that made it. cold in one hand, fire in the other, and between them Ymir. Where they met, in the middle of the gap, the ice began to melt. Drops formed, the drops gathered, and from the gathering a shape emerged, Emir, the first giant. Emir was not born the way a child is born. Emir condensed, the way dew condenses on a blade of grass, except the blade of grass was the void, and the dew was the first living thing, and the living thing was enormous, larger than anything that would ever live again, because Ymir was not a creature in the world. Ymir was the raw material from which the world would be butchered. Butchered, not built, butchered. The Norse did not build their world. They slaughtered it into existence. But first, Ymir needed to eat. From the melting ice, a cow emerged. Audhumla. A vast, steaming, impossible cow standing in the void, her udder producing 4 rivers of milk that fed the sleeping giant. And Audhumla herself fed by licking the salt from the ice, her rough tongue rasping the frozen surface. And as she licked, she uncovered something. A face, a body, a man in the ice, licked free over 3 days. The first day his hair appeared. The second day his head. The third day his entire body stepped out of the ice, clean and tall and alive. Buri, the ancestor of the gods. The gods came from a cow's tongue on frozen salt. There is something almost insulting about that beginning. The future rulers of Asgard did not descend from a perfect light. They were not spoken into existence by a flawless creator who understood every consequence. They came out of accident, appetite, and patience. A cow licked. A man emerged. A family followed. And that family would eventually claim the right to decide the fate of the world. That tells you something important about the Norse imagination. The sacred and the ridiculous were not enemies. They lived beside each other. The thing that feeds a giant can also reveal an ancestor of gods. A mistake can create a weapon. A joke can create a catastrophe. A small animal can irritate the highest beings in creation. Nothing is too humble to matter. Nothing is too powerful to be ridiculous. I learned that early. It is one reason I never laugh at the small things. The small things are usually waiting. The Norse never pretended their origins were dignified. The Norse were honest about beginnings. Beginnings are wet and strange and animal, and the animal was a cow, and the cow was the mother of the gods, whether the gods liked it or not. Buri had a son named Bor. Bor married a giantess. Because there was no one else to marry, the universe had a limited population, and together they had 3 sons: Odin, Vili, Ve. The 3 brothers looked at Ymir. Ymir was asleep. Ymir was always asleep, or half asleep, a creature of such immensity that consciousness was optional. The giant dreaming new giants from his own sweat, populating the void with his offspring without ever opening his eyes. The brothers decided that the void needed organizing, that the giants were too many, that the sleeping thing at the center of existence was taking up too much room. They decided, and this decision is the founding act of Norse civilization, the first thing the gods ever did. They decided to commit murder. They killed Ymir in his sleep. The blood was an ocean. The blood poured from the wounds and filled the gap and drowned nearly every giant in existence. A flood, the first flood, the flood that preceded Noah by centuries, the story that the Norse were telling around their fires, while the rest of the world had not yet learned to write it down. Nearly every giant drowned. 2 survived. A pair. They climbed onto a fragment of something. The myths argue about what, and floated on the blood until the blood became the sea. These two would have children. Their children would have children. And all of those children would remember that the gods had murdered their ancestor and drowned their family, and the remembering would be the grudge, and the grudge would last until Ragnarök. The gods never escaped this. The gods ruled a world built on a murder, and the murdered. Family lived next door. That is the first debt in the story. The gods killed Ymir, but they did not kill the memory of Emir. They could turn his flesh into earth and his bones into mountains. They could turn his blood into oceans and his skull into sky. They could scatter his remains across every distance and call the result a world. But they could not make the giants forget. The giants remembered. And memory is where revenge begins. The gods built walls because they needed protection from the giants. The giants needed no walls. They already had a reason to hate the people behind them. The gods slept inside the world they had made from their enemy's corpse. Every mountain was evidence. Every sea was evidence. Every storm carried the possibility that the old grudge was still alive. The murder was finished. The consequence was not. That would become the pattern of the Norse world. A god acts now. The price arrives later. Sometimes centuries later. Sometimes at Ragnarök. But it arrives. From Ymir's corpse, the brothers made everything. They were not gentle about it. They were not ceremonial. They were craftsmen, butchers, architects of flesh. The body was a resource, and they used every part the way a hunter uses every part of the elk. The flesh became the earth. The bones became the mountains. The teeth became the boulders that litter the Scandinavian coastline. The hair became the forests. Every pine, every birch, every dark spruce in every dark Norse forest is a hair from a dead giant's head. The blood, already a flood, settled into the oceans and the lakes and the fjords that cut the land like knife wounds, which they are. The skull became the sky. The brothers lifted the skull and placed it over the earth, a dome, a ceiling, propped up at four corners by four dwarves, north, south, east, west, the dwarves whose names are directions, the dwarves who hold up the sky as their eternal unpaid labor. And Ymir's brains became the clouds. Every cloud you see is a thought that Ymir never finished thinking. The brothers took sparks from Muspelheim, embers, really, scraps of fire stolen from Surtur's realm, and flung them into the skull sky. The sparks stuck. The sparks became stars. They gave the brightest sparks, chariots and horses, and set them on paths across the dome. The sun, driven by a girl named Sol. The moon, driven by her brother Mani. But the chariots do not move because the drivers want them to. The chariots move because the drivers are being chased. Two wolves, Skoll pursuing the sun, Hati pursuing the moon, running since the beginning, gaining slowly, so slowly that the gaining is invisible on any given day, but over centuries, over millennia, the wolves are closer. The gap between the hunter and the hunted narrows. One day the wolves will catch them. That day is Ragnarök. The brothers found 2 logs on a beach. Driftwood, nothing remarkable. The flotsam of a newly made ocean washed up on a newly made shore. 2 logs lying in the sand. Odin knelt beside them. Odin gave them breath. Vili gave them wit and feeling. They gave them hearing and sight and the warmth of skin. The logs stirred. The logs sat up. The logs looked at each other. The logs were people now. Ask and Embla, the first man and the first woman, given life not from clay, not from divine intention, not from a grand plan, from driftwood, from garbage, from the things the sea did not want. The Norse made humanity from what the ocean threw away. And perhaps that is why the Norse never believed humans were particularly special. Humans were driftwood given breath, useful, alive, but not the point. The gods were the point. The tree was the point. The story was the point. Humans were the audience. The tree, Yggdrasil, the world tree, the great ash whose roots plunge into 3 wells and whose branches hold the heavens, and whose trunk connects the 9 worlds like a spine connects the bones of a body. Yggdrasil is not in the world. Yggdrasil is the world. Everything hangs from the tree. Everything depends on the tree. Everything lives and dies in the tree's shadow. 3 roots, 3 wells. 1 root reaches to Asgard, the home of the gods, where the well of Erd sits, the well of fate, tended by 3 women, the Norns, who carve the destiny of every living thing into the bark of the tree. Past, present, future. Carved. Not written on parchment. Not spoken into air. Carved into the living wood, the carving that is the fate that is the carving, the permanence that cannot be erased. The Norns carve, even for gods, even for Odin. Even Odin has his fate carved, and even Odin cannot change it, and the cannot is the central truth of Norse mythology. The future is fixed. The future is carved. The future is in the wood. 1 root reaches to Jotunheim, the land of the giants, where Mimir's well sits, the well of wisdom. This is the well Odin will visit. This is the well that will cost him his eye. 1 root reaches to Niflheim, where the dragon Nidhogg gnaws, always gnawing, chewing the root, eating the foundation. The dragon that is entropy, that is decay, that is the slow, patient, unrelenting fact that everything, even the world tree, even the structure of reality, is being consumed from below. And between the dragon at the bottom and the eagle at the top, a squirrel runs. I used to think that was a joke placed inside a serious story. Then I learned to see the deeper joke. The universe contains death at the roots, fire at the horizon, fate carved into wood, gods preparing for an unavoidable ending, and somewhere in the middle, a squirrel is carrying insults. That is not an accident. The Norse could imagine terror without pretending terror was the only thing worth seeing. They could look at the end of everything and still notice a tiny animal running up a tree with gossip in its mouth. They could believe the future was fixed and still make room for mischief. Ratatoskr does not save the world. He does not defeat Nidhogg. He does not stop Ragnarök. He simply keeps moving. Perhaps that is why I remember him. Because sometimes survival is not victory. Sometimes survival is movement. 1 step, then another, up the trunk, down the trunk, again, again, again. Ratatoskr, up and down, carrying insults. Between the eagle and the dragon, stirring trouble, making mischief. A small, fast, pointless creature whose only purpose is to make sure that the highest and the lowest never stop arguing. The squirrel is my favorite part of the cosmology, because the squirrel is the proof that the Norse had a sense of humor about their own universe. Odin wanted to know everything, not the way a scholar wants to know, the way a desperate man wants to know. I have seen men seek knowledge because they are curious. Odin was not curious. Curiosity asks a question and is willing to wait. Odin asked questions as though the answer were medicine and he were already bleeding. He wanted to know what the Norns had carved. He wanted to know what the dead knew. He wanted to know what the giants remembered. He wanted to know what the runes could do. He wanted to know what waited after the last sunrise. And beneath all of it was fear. Not the fear of pain. Not the fear of humiliation. The fear of surprise. Odin could accept death if he knew the road toward it. What he could not accept was ignorance, because ignorance leaves a man helpless, and Odin would rather lose an eye than be helpless. That is why the sacrifice at Mimir's well was not really about wisdom. It was about control, or the attempt at control. He wanted to look into the future and say, I know. But knowing is not the same as changing, and that difference would destroy him. The way a desperate man wants to know. Odin wanted knowledge the way a drowning man wants air, completely, frantically, with the absolute willingness to pay any price, because the alternative to knowing is the dark, and the dark is the void, and the void is the gap, and the gap is where everything started and where everything will end. Odin knew the ending was coming. That was the problem. Odin knew enough to know that the ending existed, but not enough to know how to prevent it. The future was carved in the tree by the Norns, and the carving said, Ragnarök. The carving said, the wolf will swallow the father. The carving said, everything ends. Odin could read the carving. Odin could not rewrite it. So Odin did the next best thing. Odin gathered knowledge the way a general gathers weapons before a battle he knows he will lose. Not to win, to fight well, to go into the dark knowing that he went with open eyes and an open mind, and that the opening cost him half his sight. The eye, Mimir's well, the well at the root of the tree in Jotunheim, the water that contained all wisdom, every secret, every hidden thing, every truth that the world had buried. Odin walked to the well. Odin stood at the edge. Odin looked down into the water and saw, in the reflection, his own face looking back with two eyes. He would leave with one. A drink, Odin said. Mimir, the Ancient One, the Guardian, the Keeper of the Well, looked at the god. Mimir did not ask why. Mimir did not ask what Odin hoped to learn. Mimir asked only the price. An eye, Mimir said, your eye, placed in my well, staying in my water, looking up from the bottom forever. Odin did not hesitate. The hesitation would have been human. The hesitation would have been the weighing, the calculating, the practical measuring of what is gained against what is lost. Odin did not weigh. Odin reached to his own face. Odin took his eye from its socket, and I will not describe the taking, because the taking is not the point, the paying is the point, and Odin dropped the eye into the well. The eye sank. Odin drank, and the water was the knowing. The knowing was the future. The knowing was Ragnarök, every detail, every death, every fire, every fall. Odin drank the future the way a man drinks poison, willingly, knowingly, with the understanding that the drinking will change him, and that the changing will be permanent, and that the permanent will be the pain. Odin saw everything. His own death in the wolf's mouth, Thor's 9 steps, the fire of Surtur, the falling stars, the drowning earth, everything. And Odin walked away from the well with one eye and the weight of a future he could not change. That was the cruelest bargain. The price bought him exactly what he asked for. Nothing more, he knew. And because he knew, every ordinary day became a countdown. Every feast was temporary. Every victory contained an ending. Every sun carried a future wound. Every sunrise was one sunrise closer to the darkness. Knowledge had not relieved Odin's fear. It had given his fear a calendar. I think this is why he sent the ravens. Hugin and Munin were not decorations. They were his eyes, when his one remaining eye could not be everywhere. They were his argument against ignorance. Every evening they returned with stories. What had happened? Who had lied? Who had died? Who had been born? What men whispered when they thought no god was listening? Odin collected those details because he knew something else. Ragnarök would not arrive as one isolated event. It would be the accumulation of everything that had been ignored. Every broken oath, every feud, every lie, every death, every consequence finally arriving together. The end of the world would be an enormous bill. Odin spent his life reading the invoice. That was not enough. The runes were not enough either, though the runes cost 9 days of hanging from the world tree, pierced by his own spear, starving, screaming, dying but not dead, the god sacrificing himself to himself. The prayer addressed to no one because there was no one higher to pray to. 9 days on the tree. The runes came to him on the 9th day, rising from below. The alphabet that is also magic, the writing that is also power. Each rune a sound, a meaning, a spell. 24 runes. 24 keys to the locks of the universe. Odin screamed when he saw them. Not from pain, from recognition. The scream of a man who has been looking for something in the dark, and who has finally found it, and who realizes, in the finding, that the thing he found is heavier than he expected. Even that was not enough. Odin sent 2 ravens across the world every morning. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory. The birds flew over Midgard and returned at dusk, perching on Odin's shoulders, whispering into his ears everything they had seen. Every battle, every birth, every lie told in a mead hall, every prayer whispered at a crossroads. Odin feared for them. He said, and this is recorded, this is in the poems, he said, I fear for Hugin, that he may not return, but I fear more for Munin. I fear more for memory. The god who had sacrificed everything for knowledge feared, most of all, that he would lose his memory. Because knowledge without memory is noise, and memory is the thread that connects the knowing to the understanding. And the understanding is the only thing that gives the sacrifice meaning. Odin feared losing his memory, the most human fear of the highest god. Now, Thor. If Odin was the mind of the Norse pantheon, Thor was the fist. Odin sat on his throne and thought. Thor stood on the road and swung. The difference between them is the difference between the king and the soldier, the planner and the doer, the man who sees the future and the man who punches it in the face. Thor was the most popular god, not Odin. Odin was respected. Odin was feared. Odin was worshipped by kings and poets and warriors who hoped to die well. But Thor was loved. Thor was loved by farmers and fishermen and the ordinary people who did not die in glorious battle, but who died of cold and age, and the particular, unheroic difficulties of a life lived at the edge of the Arctic. Thor protected them. Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, was forged by dwarves. The dwarves Sindri and Brakr, working in their forge beneath the mountains, the forge that was hot enough to melt the bones of stars. They made the hammer with a short handle, too short, because a fly bit Brakr's eyelid while he worked the bellows, and the fly was Loki, because the fly was always Loki. because Loki could not resist sabotaging even the things that would protect the gods. The short handle meant Thor had to get close to swing. The short handle meant Thor fought at arm's length. The short handle was a flaw, and the flaw was Loki's doing. And Loki's doing was always the thing that made the gift imperfect. And the imperfect was the human, and the human was the point. That is why Mjolnir matters more than its weight. The hammer is not perfect. The weapon that protects the gods contains a visible mistake. Its handle is too short. Its construction is the product of sabotage. Its greatest flaw is the fingerprint of the god, who will eventually help destroy the world. The Norse did not require perfection from their heroes. Thor could be brave and foolish in the same breath. Odin could be wise and manipulative in the same breath. Freya could be loving and violent. Tyr could represent justice and lose his hand through deception. The contradiction does not weaken the stories. It gives them weight. A perfect god would be impossible to understand. A god who makes a mistake is familiar. A god who makes a mistake and pays for it is human enough to matter. Thor's hammer was imperfect. Thor was imperfect. And still the hammer was lifted. Still the giants ran when they saw it. Still the thunder came. Still people prayed. Thor went to Jotunheim more than any other god. Thor walked into the land of the giants the way a sheriff walks into a town, looking for trouble, expecting trouble, ready for the trouble that the looking would produce. The fishing trip. Thor went fishing with the giant Ymir. Thor baited his hook with the head of Ymir's largest ox, the entire head, because Thor does not do things in moderation, and threw the line into the sea. The line sank. The line sank past the fish, past the whales, past the dark places where the light does not reach. The line sank to the bottom of the ocean where Yrmungandr lay, the Midgard serpent, Loki's child, the body that encircled the world. The serpent took the bait. The line went taut. The boat lurched. Thor planted his feet so hard that they went through the hull and touched the ocean floor, the god, bracing himself against the bottom of the sea while pulling the serpent from the deep. The serpent's head broke the surface. Thor saw it, the face, the scales, the eyes that were the size of shields, the venom dripping from the fangs, the venom hissing where it hit the water. Thor raised his hammer. The moment, the chance to kill the serpent now, before Ragnarök, before the prophecy, to change the future, to rewrite the carving in the tree. Ymir cut the line. The giant, terrified, took his knife and cut the fishing line, and the serpent sank back into the deep. The chance was gone. The moment was gone. The hammer swung at empty air. Thor threw Ymir into the ocean. The serpent returned to its circle around the world, and the future remained carved, and Ragnarök remained certain. Thor's visit to Utgard is the story that tells you everything about Thor and everything about the Norse. Thor traveled to Utgard Loki's hall, the hall of the giant king, the castle at the edge of the world. Thor went with Loki and a servant, 3 travelers walking into the stronghold of the enemy, because Thor walked into strongholds the way other men walked into taverns. The giant king set challenges. Loki was challenged to an eating contest. Loki ate fast, faster than any god or mortal, devouring the meat from the trencher with the speed of a fire. But his opponent ate the meat and the bones and the trencher itself. Loki lost. Thor was challenged to drain a drinking horn. Thor lifted the horn. Thor drank 3 enormous draughts, the kind of draughts that would empty a lake. The horn's level barely dropped. Thor was challenged to lift a cat, a gray cat sitting on the floor. Thor grabbed the cat and heaved. Thor, the strongest being in the 9 worlds, could not lift the cat. Thor managed, straining with every muscle, to lift one paw from the floor. One paw. Thor was challenged to wrestle an old woman, a thin, stooped, ancient woman named Ellie. Thor grabbed her. Thor pushed. Thor fought with the strength that had killed giants and lifted mountains. The old woman did not fall. The old woman forced Thor to one knee. One knee. Thor was humiliated. Thor was furious. Thor was ready to bring the hall down around their ears. Then Utgard Loki told the truth. The eating opponent had been wildfire itself. Loki had raced fire, and the only miracle was that Loki had almost kept up. The drinking horn had been connected to the sea. Thor had been drinking the ocean, and the ocean's level had dropped. The tides had changed. Thor had created the tides by drinking. The cat was Yrmungandr, the Midgard serpent, disguised as a cat. Thor had lifted the serpent, the thing that encircled the world, and had raised one coil from the ocean floor. The old woman was old age. Ellie was old age itself, and Thor had not been pinned. Thor had been brought to one knee. No one had ever lasted that long against old age. No one had ever fought aging to a draw. Thor lost every contest. Thor was the most impressive loser in the history of the gods, because Thor was drinking the ocean, wrestling time, lifting the world serpent. Thor was fighting and nearly winning, and the nearly is the point, and the point is the Norse. The Norse did not tell stories about winning. The Norse told stories about fighting well against things that cannot be beaten. That is why the humiliations mattered. A story where Thor simply wins every contest would be a story about strength. The Utgard story is a story about limits. The ocean is larger than Thor. Time is older than Thor. The world serpent is too large for Thor to lift completely. And yet he tries. That is the difference between courage and certainty. Certainty says, I will win. Courage says, I may lose, and I am going anyway. The second is more frightening. The second is more useful. The second is what Odin wants in his warriors, because Odin has already seen the end. He does not need warriors who believe they are immortal. He needs warriors who know they can die and still walk toward the battlefield. Valhalla makes sense only after you understand that. The dead are not rewarded with peace. They are recruited into preparation. They practice dying because the final death will not heal. Every morning they rise. Every evening they fall. Every night they eat. Every morning they do it again. The repetition is the lesson. The repetition is the training. The repetition is the answer to a future that cannot be changed. The ocean cannot be drunk. Time cannot be wrestled. The serpent cannot be lifted. But Thor tried. And the trying was the glory. And the glory was the trying. Loki. Loki is the reason the gods have nice things. And Loki is the reason the gods lose them. Loki got the gods Mjolnir by betting the dwarves they could not make it, then trying to sabotage the making, then losing the bet, then offering his head as payment, but arguing that his neck was not included in the deal. The argument so absurd, and so perfectly Loki, that the dwarves sewed his mouth shut instead of cutting his head off. Loki's mouth sewn shut. The silence lasted 3 days. The gods said it was the most peaceful 3 days in the history of Asgard. Loki got the gods the wall around Asgard by promising a giant builder that he could have the sun, the moon, and Freya if he finished the wall in 1 winter. The gods agreed because the task was impossible. The giant nearly finished it because the giant had a stallion that could haul stones faster than any creature alive. Loki, panicking, transformed into a mare, seduced the stallion, and lured it away from the work. The wall was not finished. The giant did not get the sun or the moon or Freya. And Loki, months later, returned to Asgard leading an 8-legged foal. Sleipnir, Odin's horse, Loki's child, born because Loki became a mare to save the gods from a deal that Loki had made. This is Loki, the problem that solves itself by becoming a different, stranger problem. The fire that puts itself out by starting a flood. The god who is the illness and the medicine and the side effects. Valhalla. Odin's hall. The hall of the slain. The hall where the warriors go when they die in battle, chosen by the Valkyries, the choosers of the slain, the women on flying horses who ride above the battlefield and select the best, the bravest, the ones whose dying was good enough to earn the afterlife that Odin offers. The Valkyries choose. The chosen go to Valhalla. And in Valhalla, the chosen fight. Every day. They wake at dawn. They put on their armor. They walk onto the field. They fight each other. They kill each other. They die. And at evening they rise. The wounds heal. The dead stand. The killed and the killer walk together into the hall, sit at the same table, drink the same mead, eat the same boar, sighed Ymir, the boar that is slaughtered and cooked and eaten every night, and that is alive again every morning. They fight and die and feast and rise and fight again. Every day. Forever. Until Ragnarök. Because the fighting is not entertainment. The fighting is training. The Einherjar, the warriors of Valhalla, are training for the final battle. They are dying every day so that when the real dying comes, the dying that does not heal, the dying that is Ragnarök, they will be ready. Odin is building an army. Odin knows the future. Odin knows the wolf will swallow him. Odin knows the gods will fall. Odin is gathering every great warrior who has ever lived, training them, feeding them, preparing them for a battle that the future says they will lose. Odin is building an army for a war he knows he cannot win. Because the Norse do not fight to win. The Norse fight to fight. That sentence sounds simple until you understand how brutal it is. It means the value of a life is not measured only by what it accomplishes. Sometimes the value is in what it refuses to surrender. Freya understood this differently from Odin. She did not simply collect the dead because they were useful soldiers. She understood grief. She knew that war produced widows and empty houses as well as heroes. Her tears became gold because the Norse imagination refused to separate treasure from sorrow. Tyr understood it through law. To swear an oath is to place part of yourself inside another person's trust. When Fenrir bit down on Tyr's hand, the injury was not merely physical. It was the cost of a broken promise. Baldur understood it through innocence. He was loved because everyone believed he could not be harmed. That belief became a game. The game became a weakness. The weakness became the opening Loki needed, and Sigyn would understand it through patience. A bowl, a serpent, a cave, a husband who deserved punishment, a woman who stayed anyway. Every story was teaching the same thing from a different direction. Nothing remains untouched. Not love, justice, not strength, not innocence, not even the gods. Freya, the goddess who gets mentioned too little and who mattered too much. Freya was not a gentle goddess of flowers and romance. Freya was the goddess of love and war and death and Sather, the deep magic, the shamanic magic, the magic that Odin himself had to learn from her, the learning costing him his dignity because Sather was considered women's magic, and a male god practicing it was a scandal. Odin practiced it anyway, because the knowledge was worth the scandal. Freya rode a chariot pulled by cats, not small cats, large, fierce Norse cats, the kind of cats that hunt in the snow and drag their kills across frozen rivers. Freya's cats were warriors. Freya's cats were the escorts of a goddess who did not need escorting, but who kept them anyway, because Freya understood that power is sometimes the company you keep. Freya chose half the battle dead. Before Odin, Freya got first pick. This is a detail that the popular retellings often leave out. The highest god of war did not get first choice of the slain. The goddess did. Freya wept tears of gold when her husband was lost. She wandered the world searching for him, weeping, and where the tears fell on earth they became gold, and where they fell on the sea they became amber. The gold that the Norse valued above all things was the grief of a goddess. The Norse made treasure from tears. Tyr, the god of justice, the god of law, the god whose name is so old that it predates Odin, that may have once been the highest god before Odin took the throne, the god who was demoted from king to soldier, and who accepted the demotion because Tyr is justice, and justice accepts what is right even when what is right is the of justice. Tyr placed his hand in the wolf's mouth. Fenrir, the great wolf, Loki's child, was growing beyond control, growing beyond containment. The gods decided to bind Fenrir with a magical chain, a chain forged by dwarves from 6 impossible things: the sound a cat makes when it walks, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, the spit of a bird. 6 things that do not exist, woven into a chain, because only the impossible can bind the impossible. But Fenrir was suspicious. The wolf agreed to be bound only if a god placed a hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. Tyr volunteered. Tyr, the god of law, placed his right hand, his sword hand, his oath hand, the hand that embodied justice, into the mouth of the wolf. The chain was placed. The chain held. The wolf pulled. The chain did not break. The wolf bit down. Tyr's hand was gone. The god of justice lost his hand to an act of deception. The gods had lied. The gods had told Fenrir the binding was a test, a game, a temporary thing. The gods lied, and the god of justice paid for the lie with the hand that swore oaths. The Norse stared directly at this. The Norse did not excuse their gods. The Norse said, the gods lied. The gods bound the wolf with deception. And the god of justice paid the price. And the price was the hand. And the hand was the justice. And the justice was broken. Because sometimes, to save the world, you must break the thing the world stands on. And the breaking is the beginning of the end. Baldur dreamed of his own death. Not a vague dream, not a feeling. A specific, detailed, rehearsed dream in which the god of light, the most loved being in the 9 worlds, died. He dreamed it again, and again. The dream repeating the way a bell repeats, the same note, the same tone, the same message. You will die. Baldur told his mother. Frigg listened. Frigg did not dismiss the dream. Frigg did not say, dreams are nothing, dreams are smoke, dreams are the mind at play. Frigg knew better. Frigg knew that in this world, in this mythology, dreams are the future leaking through the cracks in the present, and the leaking is the warning, and the warning must be answered. Frigg answered. Frigg went to everything in the 9 worlds and asked it to swear an oath, not to hurt Baldur. Every stone swore, every metal swore, every disease, every poison, every beast, every element. Fire swore it would not burn him. Water swore it would not drown him. Iron swore it would not pierce him. Frigg walked the 9 worlds collecting oaths the way a woman collects seashells on a beach, one by one, patient, thorough, driven by the love that says, I will ask the entire universe to protect my son. She asked the entire universe. The entire universe agreed, except one thing. The mistletoe, small, young, insignificant, growing on a branch of an oak, thin as a needle, soft as a whisper. Frigg passed it by, too young to swear an oath, too small to be a threat, too nothing to be anything. The mistake that would end the age. The gods, hearing that Baldur was invulnerable, turned the invulnerability into entertainment. They stood in a circle and threw things at him. Stones bounced off his chest. Axes glanced off his head. Spears slid past his skin. Nothing could touch him. The throwing became a game, and the game became a celebration. And the celebration was the joy of a world that has cheated death, that has outmaneuvered fate, that has found the loophole in the carving on the tree. They laughed. They should not have laughed. Loki was not laughing. Loki was watching. Loki was thinking. Loki was doing the thing that Loki always did, which was finding the exception, the overlooked, the asked, the thing that everyone else assumed was too small to matter. Loki found the mistletoe. Loki sharpened it into a dart, or an arrow, or a spear. The myths vary. The weapon varies. The sharpening does not vary. Loki made a weapon from the one thing in the universe that had not promised to spare Baldur. Hodr stood at the edge of the circle. Baldur's brother, blind, unable to participate, unable to throw, unable to see the joy. Loki approached. Why don't you throw? Loki said. Everyone else is throwing. Join the game. I'll guide your hand. Loki placed the mistletoe in Hodr's hand. Loki aimed Hodr's arm. Loki guided the throw. The mistletoe flew. The mistletoe struck. Baldur fell. The silence that followed is the silence that defines the Norse world. Not a stunned silence. Not a confused silence. A silence that is the sound of a universe realizing that the cheat did not work, that the loophole was not a loophole, that the carving on the tree cannot be erased by oaths, and that the god of light is lying on the ground with a twig of mistletoe through his heart. Baldur was dead, the first god to die, the practiced death, the rehearsal for Ragnarök, the proof that even the gods, even the most loved, even the ones protected by the sworn oaths of every stone and fire and river in the 9 worlds, can fall. They tried to bring him back. Hermod, Baldur's brother, rode Sleipnir to Helheim. 9 days down. 9 days through valleys so deep that the sun was a rumor. 9 days to the hall of Hel, Loki's daughter, the half-alive, half-dead goddess whose face was beauty on one side and decay on the other. Hermod begged. Hel set a condition. If everything in the 9 worlds weeps for Baldur, Baldur returns. If one thing refuses, Baldur stays. Everything wept, every stone, every tree, every animal, every river, every god, every giant. The 9 worlds wept for the bright god, the tears flowing like the rivers of Niflheim, the grief universal, the mourning total. Except a giantess in a cave, dry-eyed, who said 4 words that sealed the fate of the gods. Let hell keep what she has. 4 words. Baldur stayed dead. The giantess, every telling agrees, was Loki in disguise. Loki killed Baldur with the mistletoe. Loki kept Baldur dead with 4 words. The punishment was extreme. The gods caught Loki. The gods caught Loki's sons. The gods killed one son and turned the other into a wolf that devoured his brother. I will not dwell on this, the cruelty is the point. And the gods took the entrails of the dead son and used them as chains. They bound Loki in a cave beneath the earth. They placed a serpent above his face, dripping venom onto him, the acid burning, the burning constant. Sigyn, Loki's wife, the faithful wife, the wife who followed her. Husband into the cave and who holds a bowl above his face, catching the venom drop by drop, protecting him from the acid that the gods decreed as punishment. The bowl fills. That is the image I remember most. Not Loki screaming, not the serpent, not the cave, the bowl. Because the end of a world is rarely made only from armies. It is also made from small, repeated sufferings. 1 drop, another drop, another. A woman stands there and catches them. A little more pain waits. Then another moment. Then another. That is how endurance looks from close enough. Not heroic, not beautiful, simply continuing. Sigyn cannot stop the punishment. She cannot free Loki. She cannot rewrite the past. She cannot remove the serpent. She can only hold the bowl. And so she does. Until Ragnarök. When the bowl is full, Sigyn must turn away to empty it. In the moment she turns, the venom hits Loki's face. The pain is a convulsion. The convulsion shakes the earth. Earthquakes, the Norse said. Earthquakes are the moments when Sigyn empties the bowl. Sigyn holds the bowl, still, now, in the dark, with the husband who killed the light, with the patience that is not forgiveness but love, and the love is not approval but presence, and the presence is the only thing left. Sigyn holds the bowl. Until Ragnarök. Fimblewinter comes first. 3 winters without summer. 3 years of snow that does not melt, wind that does not warm, darkness that does not lift. The sun pale, the harvests dead, the cattle starving, the people starving, the world turning inward, turning cold, turning on itself. During Fimblewinter, the human bonds dissolve. Brother betrays brother. Father turns on son. Oaths are broken. Marriages collapse. The social fabric, the agreements, and the trusts that make civilization possible unravels the way a garment unravels when you pull a single thread, and the thread is the cold, and the cold is the end. 3 years of winter. Then the wolves catch the sun. Skoll closes his jaws. The light goes out. Hati takes the moon. The stars fall from the skull sky like sparks from a dying fire, and the dark that follows is not nighttime, but the void, the Ginnungagap returning, the nothing reaching back for the something that was borrowed. Heimdall blows Gjallarhorn, the horn that has never been blown, the note that splits the sky, the sound that carries across the 9 worlds, through every hall and every forest and every grave, the sound that says, "It is now." The thing you have been dreading, the thing you have known was coming, the thing that was carved in the tree before you were born. Now, Fenrir breaks the impossible chain, the chain made from from 6 things that do not exist. The chain that held because the impossible held, and now the impossible lets go. And the wolf is free, and the wolf's jaw opens so wide that the upper jaw scrapes the sky, and the lower jaw drags the earth. Yrmungandr releases his tail. The serpent that has been holding the world together by holding it captive lets go. The ocean surges. The coastlines drown. The serpent rises, and the venom from its mouth falls like rain, and the rain is poison, and the poison is the sky. Loki breaks free. The entrails snap. The venom drips onto empty stone. Sigin's bowl clatters to the floor of the cave, empty, no longer needed, the vigil over. Loki stands. Loki walks into the gray light of a world that no longer has a sun, and the walking is the ending, and the ending is Loki's purpose. Loki sails Naglfar, the ship of the dead's fingernails, built over centuries, nail by nail, from every corpse that was not properly tended. The ship is crewed by the dead of Helheim, the quiet dead, the unheroic dead, the dead who died in bed and who are now, finally, given a purpose that is not quiet and not unheroic. Surtur marches from the south, from Muspelheim, with his sword. The sword he has been holding since before the world existed. The fire giant whose patience is the oldest patience. Surtur crosses the Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, the bridge that connects Asgard to Midgard, and the bridge shatters under his heat, the colors breaking, the rainbow falling in pieces into the void below. The armies meet on Vigrid. By then, nobody is surprised. That is important. The gods have known. The giants have remembered. The wolves have chased. The serpent has circled. The Norns have carved. Odin has prepared. The dead have trained. The end has been approaching for so long that when it finally arrives, it feels less like an explosion and more like a door opening. There is no miracle that saves them. No forgotten weapon that suddenly changes the prophecy. No secret message from beyond the tree. The gods go because this is what they were always going to do. They ride toward the battlefield, knowing the battlefield belongs to the future they have already seen. And still they ride. That is why the Norse gods are tragic. They do not lose because they were too weak to fight. They lose because the fight is larger than victory. The point is that they arrive. The plain that is 100 leagues in every direction. The plain that has been empty since the creation, waiting for this, reserved for this. The battlefield that is the last page. Odin rides forward on Sleipnir. 8 legs on the dead plain. 1 eye in the ruined sky. The spear Gungnir in his hand. The spear that never misses. The spear that has struck every target Odin has ever aimed at. Except Fenrir. Gungnir will not save him. Odin knows this. Odin rides forward anyway. Fenrir and Odin meet, the wolf and the god, the chained and the chainer, the lied to and the liar. The mouth opens. The god enters. The mouth closes. Odin is swallowed. The wisest being in the 9 worlds, consumed by a wolf, the knowledge and the eye, and the runes and the ravens, and the hanging and the mead, and the centuries of preparation, all disappearing into the throat of an animal whose only thought is hunger. Vidar, Odin's son, steps forward, the silent god, the god who has been saving his words and his strength for this single moment. Vidar places a boot on the wolf's lower jaw, a boot made from leather scraps collected over all of history. Every scrap of leather ever discarded by cobbler assembled into 1 shoe for 1 step on 1 jaw, and grips the upper jaw and tears. The wolf splits. The father is avenged, but the father is still dead. Thor and Ymir meet for the last time, not on a fishing line, not in the guise of a cat. Face to face, hammer to fang, thunder to venom. They fight the way the sky fights the sea, with everything, with the full force of their natures, the collision of the protector and the clash that the fishing trip foreshadowed and the drinking contest measured, and the entire mythology has been building toward. Thor kills the serpent. The hammer falls one final time. The serpent collapses, and the collapse is the tremor that cracks the remaining foundations of the world. Thor walks backward. 1 step, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He falls, face forward, into the mud, the venom in his blood, the hammer still in his hand, the protector dead, the humans unprotected, the thunder silent. Freya faces Surtur without a sword. Freya, the god of the harvest, who gave his sword away for love, traded his weapon for a giantess named Gerd, chose love over safety, chose the heart over the hand, faces the fire with empty hands. Freya falls. The price of the love is the dying. Heimdall and Loki find each other, the watcher and the trickster, the one who guards the gate and the one who breaks it. They fight. They kill each other. Both fall. At the same moment, in the same mud, the symmetry that the carving demanded. Tyr fights the hound Garm. They kill each other. The one-handed god of justice and the guard dog of the underworld, locked together, neither surviving. Surtur stands alone. Surtur swings his sword. And the fire that has been waiting since Muspelheim first burned in the south of the gap. The fire that Surtur has carried in his sword since before the cow licked the first god from the ice. The fire that is the original element, older than the world, older than the tree, older than the gods. The fire covers everything. The tree burns. The 9 worlds burn. Asgard burns. Midgard burns. The earth sinks into the boiling sea. The sea rises to meet the falling sky. The skull sky cracks, and the dome collapses, and the 4 dwarves who held it up are finally released from their labor. Everything burns, and if you have listened carefully, you will recognize the shape. The world began with ice meeting fire. The world ends when fire meets everything. The beginning was a gap. The ending becomes a gap again. That symmetry is not an accident. The Norse imagination did not need the universe to be permanent in order for it to be meaningful. A temporary world could still contain courage. A temporary life could still contain love. A temporary victory could still matter. The world burns, and that does not make the world worthless. It makes every moment inside it more expensive. If you knew your house would burn tomorrow, you would look differently at the light on the wall tonight. If you knew every face you loved would disappear, you would remember their faces more carefully. If you knew the gods themselves would die, you would listen harder when they spoke. That is the gift hidden inside Ragnarök. Not hope. Attention. The fire and the water meet, the way they met in the beginning in the gap, and the meeting is the unmaking, and the unmaking is the return, and the return is the void. The void. The beginning and the ending are the same place. The Norse understood this. The Norse built a mythology that is a circle, not a line. The circle that begins in the gap and ends in the gap. The circle that starts with ice meeting fire and ends with fire meeting ice. The circle that says, creation and destruction are the same act performed at different speeds. The void. But the most important word, the earth rises. From the sea, green, alive, the mountains still standing, the rivers still running, the waterfalls pouring down into valleys that have never been farmed, forests that have never been cut, fields that have never been burned because these fields are new. These fields have never existed before. These fields are the world after the world. Green. The color that comes after the fire. The color that the ash becomes when the rain falls, and the soil remembers, and the roots find their way back. Green. Baldur returns from hell. The bright god, the dead god, walking out of the underworld and into the light of a world that has been cleaned by fire. Beside him, Hodr, the blind brother, the one who threw the dart, forgiven, reconciled, the killer and the killed, walking together into the new world, the grudge dissolved, the mistake absorbed, the future larger than the past. Vidar and Vali survive. Modi and Magni, Thor's sons, survive, carrying Mjolnir between them, the hammer that their father lifted alone, the hammer that is the inheritance. They gather on a plain called Idovalr, and in the grass they find golden chess pieces. The pieces, the game pieces that the gods played with. In the old Asgard before the fire, the pieces have survived the burning. The pieces have lain in the grass through the fire and the flood and the void, waiting the way a story waits, the way a game waits, the way the gold waits in the earth for the hand that will find it. The pieces are found. The game resumes, and two humans climb from the trunk of Yggdrasil and Lifthrasir, life and life stubborn, sheltered by the tree, fed by morning dew, alive. The tree that burned did not burn completely. The tree that held the worlds held these two, the way a mother holds a child during a fire, the arms that are the shelter that is the surviving. Two humans in a green field with dew for food. Under a new sun, the daughter of the old sun, born before the wolf came, hidden, waiting, rising now in a sky that has no wolf to chase her, and no skull to contain her, and no dead giant's brains for clouds. A new sky. A clean sky. A sky that has never heard of Ragnarök. This is what the Norse gave us. Not just the fire, the field, not just the dying, the rising, not just the wolf and the serpent and the sword, the chess pieces in the grass. The Norse said everything ends. The gods die. The world burns. The tree falls. The wolf wins. And then the earth rises, and the sun returns, and the dead god walks out of the dark, and the humans emerge from the tree, and the game. Pieces are found in the grass, and it begins again. Not exactly as before. That is important too. The Norse cycle is not a perfect circle that returns every object to its exact place. It is a return with memory. Baldur remembers. The surviving gods remember. The two humans remember nothing because they were sheltered, but they inherit the world anyway. The gold pieces remember nothing, but they survived. The tree remembers everything because the tree is everything. The new world is not the old world repaired. It is the old world transformed by what happened to it. That is why the game can begin again. Because the players are different. The field is different. The sky is different. The story has changed. And yet the story is still recognizable. A beginning, a struggle, a cost, a fall, a memory, a return, again. The Norse did not believe in paradise. The Norse did not believe in a final victory. The Norse believed in the cycle. The fire and the field. The dying and the rising. The ending and the beginning, joined at the hip, inseparable, the two halves of the same story. The story that does not end. The story that cannot end. Because the story is the tree. And the tree, though it burned, still stands. And the roots, though Nidhogg gnawed them, still hold. And the squirrel, though the fire came, is still running. Up and down, carrying insults, making trouble, refusing to stop. The squirrel survived. Of course, the squirrel survived. I say their names. Under the new sky, in the green field, with the grass beneath me and the daughter sun above me and the chess pieces gleaming in the light. Odin, who gave his eye, who hung from the tree, who rode into the mouth of the wolf knowing the mouth would close, who chose to know the future and who could not change it and who fought anyway. Thor, who drank the ocean, who wrestled time, who lifted the serpent, who killed the serpent and walked 9 steps and fell. 9 steps, the measure of a god's victory, the distance between the killing and the dying. Loki, who was the crack, who was the fire before the fire, who killed the light with a twig, who was chained with his own son's guts, who broke free, who sailed the ship of nails, who died fighting the god who watched the gate, who was necessary, who was the change, Baldur, who dreamed his death, who died from a twig, who waited in the dark, who came back, who forgave, Frigg, who asked the universe to protect her son, who missed the mistletoe, who sent a rider to hell, who could not bring him back, who knew the future and could not change it. Freya, whose tears were gold, whose cats pulled her chariot, who chose the slain before the father of the gods. Tyr, who placed his hand in the wolf's mouth, who lost it, who fought one-handed at the end, who died with justice broken and justice kept. Sigyn, who held the bowl, in the dark, for centuries, who caught the venom drop by drop, who is the most loyal being in all of mythology, and whose loyalty has no reward, and whose no reward is the story, and the story is the love. Fenrir, the wolf, who was chained with lies, who remembered the lies, who broke free, who swallowed the god, who was torn apart by the god's son. Yggdrasil, the tree, the ash, the spine, the shelter, the thing that held everything, and that survived everything, and that stands still. And the squirrel, Ratatoskr, the small, annoying, fast-moving creature who runs up and down the tree carrying insults and making trouble, and who survived the end of the world because the end of the world cannot stop a squirrel. Remember them, because that is what a story asks for when it has survived the people who made it. Not belief, not worship, memory. The gods are gone. The worlds are gone. The old sky is gone. The old sun is gone. The battlefield is gone. But the names remain. A name is a small thing, a sound made by a human mouth, a handful of letters on a page, a line spoken around a fire, and yet names cross centuries. Odin, Thor, Loki, Baldur, Frigg, Freya, Tyr, Sigyn, Fenrir, Yggdrasil, Ratatoskr. You do not have to believe they walked the worlds exactly as the poets described. You only have to understand that someone once needed these stories badly enough to remember them. That is why I say them, because forgetting is the real ending. Remember the gods who knew the end was coming and who got up anyway, who drank the mead anyway, who built the hall anyway, who fought the giant anyway, who loved the giantess anyway, who threw the hammer anyway, the most Norse word there is, the word that fights the future, the word that drinks the ocean, the word that lifts the serpent, the word that gets up in the morning knowing that the wolves are closer and the fire is coming and the tree is gnawed, and the chain will break. Anyway, remember them. Remember us. Remember us. Remember us.